Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today we'll learn about the growing crisis of nitrate contamination in Wisconsin's drinking water. We'll talk to some unexpected Green Bay Packers fans who live in Japan.
When they find things that they're interested in, this wall comes down and this passion comes flying out. I don't think there are bigger Packer fans in the world than these guys. So it's really beautiful.
Then we'll learn about Fat Body Hotties, a local group celebrating fat liberation.
This world was not made for bodies that are bigger or that look anything other than a smaller size. And I just never had a space where it was full of fat people.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. Wisconsin's drinking water is facing a growing crisis of nitrate contamination. That's according to a new report by the Alliance for the Great Lakes. Nitrates are commonly caused by fertilizers, manure, and agricultural runoff. They can be harmful to people at high levels, and in Wisconsin, agriculture accounts for 90% of nitrate contamination. But communities are often left footing the bill for cleanup. Angela Blatt is the Senior Agriculture Policy Manager at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. She joins me now to talk about the report. Angela, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to start with a really basic question. What are nitrates?
Nitrate is a contaminant that we find in groundwater. It is the most widespread contaminant in Wisconsin's groundwater, and it forms when oxygen combines with nitrogen-rich sources such as fertilizer, manure, or waste from something like septic tanks. And it's able to go into groundwater by way of rain or melting snow. And this typically occurs in places with shallow soil or fragmented bedrock. So in Wisconsin, it's mostly in the eastern and western portions of the state, as well as the south central portion.
So is this essentially runoff that's coming from maybe a farm or from, as you mentioned, septic tanks, that kind of thing?
Sure, yeah. So nitrate loss estimates from crop production can vary based on different factors, but studies indicate that an average of more than 25% of applied nitrogen does leach into groundwater as nitrate. And in Wisconsin, 90% of nitrate in the groundwater comes from application of those nitrogen-containing fertilizers that I mentioned, so manure, commercial fertilizer, and biosolids.
So a lot of it's coming from our agriculture, it sounds like.
It is, yes.
How are nitrates dangerous to people and animals? What are the kinds of things it can cause?
Nitrate exposure has been linked to some serious health effects, including some types of cancers, as well as pregnancy complications, and then infant methylhemoglobinemia, which has a common term as blue baby syndrome. Also can have some issues and harm to animals and livestock if ingested.
One of the big concerns that comes out of this report is just, I think, just the scale of nitrate contamination that we're seeing here in Wisconsin. What does that look like right now?
Well, since more than 75% of the state does rely on groundwater for drinking water, and we've seen nitrate loads increase statewide since 2013, while the overall trends do indicate a persistent and increasing nitrate problem, certain areas of the state are particularly vulnerable and more susceptible to that groundwater contamination. And while the federal government regulates nitrate in public drinking water systems, it doesn't regulate that in groundwater, which leaves our private wells unprotected.
So for groundwater, What are the communities that are generally relying on groundwater? Is that a community that you'd see here in the city of Milwaukee, or are we talking about more rural areas?
Yeah, about 1/3 of Wisconsin families rely on private wells, and so that's estimated about 1.7 million people in the state, and that's about 800,000 private wells. And they tend to be more affected in rural areas or areas that are seeing more heavy agricultural use.
Sure. And now, of course, groundwater has been greatly impacted, but as your report mentions, this is not just an issue in groundwater, it's also an issue in other water sources. What is the scale outside of groundwater of the contamination of nitrates in the water?
Yeah, so when we look at runoff and surface water, we're seeing that run into rivers that then drain into the Great Lakes, and we're seeing more intense and longer lasting harmful algal blooms in the Great Lakes, and nitrates definitely contribute to the toxicity of those algal blooms. So as we see more nitrate runoff, then we're seeing the toxicity of those algal blooms increase.
What is the impact of these algae blooms?
Yeah, well, we're seeing in areas where the algal blooms are present, it's causing beach closures. Folks are advised not to enter the water when we're seeing algal blooms in the Great Lakes. And then it can cause issues with water treatment systems that serve folks for drinking water, like we saw with the Toledo water crisis in 2014.
And that seems like one of the big concerns here. Water treatment centers, of course, do treat the water, as one might suggest, but the impact of these nitrates seems to then affect communities who are then paying greater amounts of money in order to get rid of these nitrates. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's true. So in the report, we did look at 4 case studies and found that municipalities are also bearing that financial burden for nitrate contamination. So in the 4 communities that we looked at, they have spent more than $45 million on nitrate mitigation, and that can come in the form of treatment, upgrades to the systems, or even possibly well replacement. And then these costs often force public water systems to raise rates, and then that passes the financial burden directly to the ratepayers.
As you mentioned, you looked at a number of communities here in Wisconsin specifically. What were the kinds of things that you heard from people living in these communities about how nitrates are affecting their lives?
Yeah, so we did talk to private well owners in the state, and when a private well is contaminated with nitrate, those individuals that aren't currently served by a public water system, they could either replace their well with a deeper or deeper cased well, or add some type of on-site filtration system. Of the private well owners that we did survey, 9 experienced nitrate contamination levels exceeding the 10 milligrams per liter standard, and of the 10 well owners, 2 had to fully replace a well, and the cost ranged from $7,500 up to over $22,000. And then a couple of other participants said that they would eventually need a new well, and it was at the estimated cost of between 15 and 20,000. One of our well owners ran a daycare business and estimated that the cost of replacing her well could be as much as $75,000. So the cost is definitely not insignificant. And even if you choose a treatment system rather than well replacement, you could still spend thousands on nitrate treatment. So a reverse osmosis system could cost anywhere from $600 to $3,000 in upfront costs, plus an additional $600 per year to maintain. And then some folks end up still having to drill a new well. And then I'll just add that while these systems can filter nitrate, they rarely treat well water down to zero, so some level of nitrate will still likely be present.
If you're just tuning in, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers, and I'm speaking right now with Angela Blatt from the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We're talking about the impact of nitrates in our water here in Wisconsin. Now, something that your report also talks about is the kinds of barriers there are to fixing this problem here in Wisconsin, and how other states are in some ways doing better than Wisconsin in confronting the issue of nitrates. What are some of the barriers to solving this problem in our water systems, and how are other states negotiating this in a different way?
Yeah, so when we looked at some of the programs and policies that are in place in Wisconsin, we realized that we need like a combination of actions to address the contamination that we have now and a more proactive approach to reduce the risk of nitrate loss to ground and surface water as we move forward. So some of the recommendations that we cover in the report are creating a statewide well testing program that helps offset the costs of water testing for homeowners and streamlines access to those sampling programs, because right now there's a requirement or a comprehensive program for well owners to be able to even test their water. So a third of private well owners haven't even had their water tested or know the nitrate level that they are experiencing. Another thing we looked at was the private well compensation program. The current program in place is rather restrictive, and the eligibility requirements make it inaccessible for some folks. To qualify for the existing program, the nitrate contamination has to exceed 40 milligrams per liter. And as you recall, 10 milligrams per liter is the federal standard. So that's 4 times the level that's considered safe today. And then also there are strict income limits and requirement that the well must also provide livestock more than 100 gallons per day, which this makes the program kind of out of reach for many Wisconsin families. We talked about the cost that municipalities have to face for treating nitrate contamination. We're recommending that municipalities track and report nitrate-related costs for public water systems. So these water utilities already provide information to the Public Service Commission each year, and we feel like ratepayers deserve to know the costs that they're incurring to remove the nitrates from their drinking water, because as of right now, that's not required to track that information.
What are some of the long-term revisions that the Alliance notes are necessary to really answering this issue?
We did look at some short-term, medium-term, and long-term policy recommendations. And long-term, just some of those are, update the state water and agriculture standards to reduce nitrate pollution, reevaluate the state nitrate groundwater and drinking water standards, and establish targeted performance standards that set stronger fertilizer and manure application requirements in areas with that high contamination level, and then also set a surface water limit for nitrate. Another recommendation that we had for the longer term is to improve enforcement of nitrate management plans. So the state cost share funding of any kind for farms should be contingent on having and following an approved nutrient management plan. Right now, 40% of agriculture land is covered under nutrient management plans. And adoption of this practice has remained relatively stagnant over the last few years, despite thousands of dollars of cost share that's going, out the door for this program. Wisconsin needs a coordinated statewide response that addresses nitrate pollution at its source. So we have some outdated policies that we talked about, and then voluntary programs that are making some strides, but they're just not enough. And we need some stronger standards and smarter nutrient management and some meaningful investments in clean water. And I think without action, nitrate contamination will just continue to pollute the drinking water, endanger those communities, and harm ecosystems and drive up costs for both farmers and ratepayers alike.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect and sharing your work.
Thank you so much.
Angela Blatt is the Senior Agriculture Policy Manager at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. She's also one of the authors of the Alliance's new report on the high levels of nitrates in Wisconsin drinking water. Later in the show, we'll learn about the history of Milwaukee's Humboldt Park. But first, why do the Green Bay Packers have some hardcore fans in Japan? We'll find out next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. A new documentary called No Packers, No Life is coming to theaters in Wisconsin next week. It follows the Japanese Packers cheering team, a group of hardcore Green Bay Packers fans in Japan. The Japanese fans cheer on the Packers at watch parties and even travel to Lambeau Field. WUWM's Maiyan Silver speaks with entrepreneur and filmmaker Ty Morse, along with two members of the cheering team, Takashi Chippo Kawarazaki and Makoto Mac Koshi.
We are excited to have you here, and obviously this was a big, exciting experience, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you became fans of the Green Bay Packers. Okay. So, Chippo, you first saw the Packers in 1993 on Japan's national broadcasting channel.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I watched the NHK TV on midnight, 1 a.m. or so. And my first game watching is the Green Bay Packers game. Brett Favre is a very good player. I thought, yes, number 4. So I became a Green Bay Packers fan. And Mac is commentator on TV.
Oh, really? Mac, you were commentating on the Packers game?
Yes. He's very famous among our Japanese American football fans.
Wow,
he's
that's
very famous.
Awesome.
I didn't confess I'm a Packers fan because I am the color commentator, so I should be neutral. Yes.
Now it's the cat's out of the bag.
I love Brett Favre then. Then I think I remember still remember 1995 season. I think I watched many Packers game. Then I decided I'm starting confess I'm a Packers fan. Again, same. Brett Favre is my hero when he played in the 1995 season, 1996 season. So same like a trigger on Chippo and myself, I think.
So Ty, you're from Milwaukee. You're an entrepreneur. You do business in Asia, especially Japan. There's a scene in the beginning of this movie where you come across these Japanese Packers super fans. And you start communicating with them by saying the players' names. You didn't really know much Japanese. They don't know much English. You start yelling out, Packers' names, and everybody starts repeating them to you.
Brett Favre, Sterling Sharp, Antonio Freeman, Donald Driver, Amon Green, John Cruz.
Is that the actual moment that you all first met?
That's literally the moment that we met. That is when we met, walked in, started speaking with Chippo. But again, it was limited interaction and a slight language barrier. My business partner, Suzuki, was there, and he was kind of starting to help. But as I was meeting and talking to Chippo, more people kept coming out of the woodwork with Packer jerseys on. And we ended up in that group that you see on film right there in the first few seconds that we met. Just that was our language. Just keep naming as many players as we could. We went back deep.
How did you?
Yes.
Yes, Chippo says yes. How did you decide to record that? Like, did you know at that moment, like, this is really amazing, I have to, like, make a film about it? Or
No, I think maybe Suzuki recorded that. Because I think that footage came from Suzuki. There was no thought of a film at that point. That was literally stumbling upon, having gone to Japan, literally over 100 times, never having seen a Packer jersey, and the randomness. And again, in Tokyo, you're talking about 40 million people. On any given street, there's 50 to 100 bars. So the fact that on this one block at this time, they were standing there inside the same place I went into was just insane. And I was just caught up in the moment of how on earth did I stumble across this massive group of Packer fans? And somebody, maybe Suzuki or maybe it was somebody from the Japanese Packers cheering team, caught that moment.
Nice. Okay. Well, as part of the film, you learn that one person studied in Milwaukee, so that's how they got into the Packers. Another person learned about it
Yeah,
through
this is
manga,
fact maybe. Yeah.
Japanese comic books. They had some stuff about football. Ty, after doing this film, do you have any insights on why there's this group of hardcore Packers fans in Japan?
I have my personal opinions on it. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with Japanese culture, which I find it's my favorite culture in the world. And I especially love when American and Japanese culture mix. I think in Japan, there's so much stress and order in society to get everything right and correct. And it's constant pressure, which creates this beautiful, wonderful place to visit because it's just so safe and so clean. But when they find things that they're interested in, this wall comes down and this passion comes flying out. I don't think there are bigger Packer fans in the world than these guys. So it's really beautiful.
So this movie, it kind of leads people through your experiences, both organizing in Japan, but then coming to Green Bay and actually watching a couple games. What touched you the most about being in Green Bay? I can tell you really quickly, my favorite moment in this film, in the whole film, was when the Japanese Packers cheering squad team came to Green Bay, and then you were in the parking lot for the tailgate and talking with people in the tailgating area and taking pictures. That was really heartwarming.
Yeah, it was unbelievable because we were all so excited and we were building bonds and, they had just gotten there and we were hanging out. But then as we're tailgating, all the people passing by are just like, it's just beautiful about Wisconsin. And that's what I love about this film too, is these guys came from all the way across the world, but Wisconsin people are just so loving and just, no way, you guys are here from Japan. And so they're just constantly coming by and interacting. And all the Japanese Packers cheering team is interacting. It was just pure positivity and excitement with random strangers.
Yes. What do you think, Chepo? Was that your favorite moment, or was there another one?
On game day, we met Mason Crosby on in the stadium. Yeah,
Nice.
that's very exciting. In my team, great Mason Crosby's fan, Sue. He's too exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good scene. I cried, half cried.
Tears.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it was really touching. There was almost this emotional reaction about the Packers and about seeing them, and it carries through to the people watching the movie. Mac, did you have a favorite moment?
I visited 2019 with my wife. Then we visited together, and also my wife is not fan of the American football at all, but she became quickly the Green Bay's fan because we really felt the warmness of the people visiting the stadium or meeting the brewery. Then even in the maybe some stranger in the stadium just behind us, he called my wife, "Hey, please stand up." So yeah, she was be seated because she got tired, so she was seated and cheering, yelling to the team. But the guy just behind us, "Hey, stand up!" So he pulled up my wife. So that's the one great moment, and also she was so surprised to see so many fans from the Green Bay City, but in the town, almost nobody. So why so many guys are appearing to the team? The third one is in the game, we got a light snow in the maybe evening, but kids, even a family with kids, never left the stadium. So the whole package, we could see the warmness of the Green Bay people. So, I'm a talkative people, so I'm often telling the greatness of the American to my wife, but that moment, only one moment could make my wife Yuko the, how to say, greatness of the Green Bay or greatness of the NFL players, because this is a culture, the American culture of the town.
I think this experience with the Japanese Packers cheering team added a whole new, for me, it brought together my two favorite things, right? My family here and where I'm from and the experience of a team that I love with this country and these people that I love in Japan. And so for me, the subculture that's been built around, this particular group, now it's my family watching all the time, but now it's, sending line messages back and forth to the Japanese Packers cheering team and going to Japan and visiting with them. I've gone and watched games with them and, so I think, and I've brought several friends over and I've introduced friends to them. So that's, it's really taken on, I think for all of our lives, it's been a really bright spot in our lives,
And of course, through the film, you get to see that you bringing them to Green Bay and the experience of that subculture joining mainstream culture, right? Because the Japanese subculture, you got to see them be in like the zone of Packers world, right?
That's exactly right. So you have this super small subculture in Japan, very, what we would consider small, even though they have a huge heart. And you said it perfectly. They came and just boom, right on the big stage, and they were the stars because of how much love and passion they have, right? And the entire story. It's about humans, It's just a very human thing of like, cross culture. It does not even matter. Like we all got here, and it was just. That's why I said I think at one point this is like a love story because it's just we all were falling in love with the being around each other and the passion we have. And yes, the catalyst is the Packers, but like there's just so many amazing people.
So my last question, what's next for you guys in terms of this Packers, Wisconsin, Japan fusion now?
Some people, there's been 3 total trips now. So,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, 3 total trips. The Japanese Packers cheering team is 3-0.
Okay.
Right. Good, great. So we visited last year, 2024, October,
Yes.
winter warning game. Chepo and me and my son, his bride. So Thai, yes, whenever we visit there, we won. So 3-0.
Yes.
Great.
Japanese Packers cheering team power.
All right. I love it.
3-0, yeah.
Mac, Chepo, and Ty, thank you so much for speaking to me about the No Packers, No Life movie that's coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.
Thank you.
That was Takashi Chibo Kawarazaki, Makoto Mac Koshi, and Ty Morse from the film No Packers, No Life. They spoke with WUWM's Maiyan Silver. The documentary is debuting in Marcus Theaters on October 17th. There's a special premiere on October 15th at the Majestic Theater in Brookfield. In about 15 minutes, we'll explore the backstory of Humboldt Park in Milwaukee's Bayview neighborhood. But first, a local group called Fat Body Hotties is creating an inclusive space in Milwaukee. We'll learn more about what they do next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. Fat Body Hotties is here to celebrate fat joy in Milwaukee, and they're proud about it. Sarah Wynatsky started the group after seeing a need for affordable and size-inclusive clothing. Alongside their co-organizer Ashley Murtis, they regularly host free clothing swaps for fat folks. Lake Effect's Excret Nunez speaks with Wynatsky and Murtis about how the group has created community through its inclusive and accessible events. Wynatsky starts by explaining the mission of Fat Body Hotties.
So, Fat Body Hotties is really a group for anyone that identifies as fat or plus size. So, we try to stay away from plus size and use fat just to kind of reclaim that word. So, yeah, it's really just a space for fat people to come together, swap clothing. That's kind of primarily what we do now. And it's also just a space to be in a room full of people that look like you, to have conversations about being in a fat body, and to get, some really essential resources.
I'm very thankful and grateful that Sarah welcomed me for being able to be a co-organizer and being able to be a part of this awesome space and mission for doing what we can with this. Sarah had 2 clothing swaps before I joined and hadn't had one for a while, and I just wanted to be a part of like the change you want to see in the world and potentially make things easier on Sarah with organizing and behind the scenes aspects that can go into a clothing swap, and just trying to do our best to contribute to positive spaces that are fat positive, gender inclusive, disability inclusive, and that people can be their authentic selves.
Absolutely. I love that. And, as a fellow hottie myself, I've personally never come across a space like this. So, Sarah, I wanted to ask you, can you talk more about the meaning behind the name and how this group first started?
So I moved here to Milwaukee in, I think it was 2021, and didn't really start doing Fat Body Hotties until I think it was 2023. And I was going to different thrift stores and just not finding anything in my size, or there's this fat tax with clothing if you're buying it, not necessarily from a thrift store, although I do see it sometimes that the prices are different, but more so those stores that are kind of geared towards fat bodies like Lane Bryant or Torrid. The quality of the clothing has kind of been declining over the years, and also the prices just keep getting more expensive. So, as I was entering kind of the workforce, I didn't have any professional clothes that fit me, that looked good on me. And so I was just thinking about, I have clothes that I don't wear anymore. What if I just host a little get together with a couple of folks where we exchange clothing? And so that was kind of the idea that got it all started. And specifically for the name, I wanted it to be catchy, but also positive, right? So we're not only trying to provide this clothing swap, but we're also wanting to uplift the folks that we're working with. So not necessarily talking about body positivity, while that is important, of course. We're more so talking about and working towards body liberation.
Yeah, I attended the swaps that Sarah had at their apartment, and I just absolutely loved what Sarah was putting together. I have background in mutual aid stuff with Food Not Bombs and like a little bit of organizing there. And it's just so much easier when it's more of like a collaborative experience and like a little bit of help. So it's so much nicer being like specific and really intentional with the way that we're doing it. With all of our clothes are XL and above. They're gender inclusive. We have ASL interpreters on site for anyone who's deaf and hard of hearing. Sherman Phoenix is wheelchair accessible. We recently decided on Sherman Phoenix and just feel like that's our home, and that's where we're going to be having them from now and going forward. And for anyone who's not familiar, Sherman Phoenix is like a mini mall, but instead of corporations, it's small businesses owned by people of color, majority Black-owned small businesses. So we're just wanting to be the change we want to see in the world and put our best foot forward with being anti-consumerist with the clothing swap. And then when you're done enjoying the clothing swap, that you can browse the small businesses and have a good time as well. So we just love our partnership there and our partnership together.
That's amazing to hear, and also a really collaborative effort. I kind of want to go back to something that you both brought up earlier of using the word fat, and it's something that you're reclaiming and using with pride. Can you talk more about that, Sarah?
Yeah, I wanted to use fat because while the body positivity movement has, encouraged people to be more accepting of bodies that look differently from others, we're taking that a step further and talking not only just about fat bodies, we're talking about disability, we're talking about all forms of ability, taking it beyond just acceptance and moving toward liberation. So we were intentional about using fat. I've my whole life have been called fat in a like derogatory way. And I hated that word so much because it hurt me so much. But then, as I kind of found my voice and really, too, with this group, not afraid to say, I identify as fat and I'm proud of that. And that's something I want other people to feel as well. But further, I want to fight not only just for fat folks, I want to include everyone because if you're fighting for liberation, you can't exclude anyone.
And I feel like also if you're not a fat person, like for me personally, people don't think about how the world is different through this
Yeah.
lens. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
No, 100%.
Um,
I 100% hear you. Yeah.
can you tell me about your relationship to clothes or shopping or just navigating spaces?
Something I don't think we've really been asked before is like our personal kind of relationship. So, yeah, I mean, especially being like femme presenting, I feel that body image is such a huge, thing to tackle. And specifically, when you're in a fat body, people automatically assume that you're fat and you're femme, which is just not the case. I'm non-binary. There are lots of other folks that are not feminine that are also fat. But my experience primarily have always struggled shopping for clothes, never been able to find clothing in my size. And as fellow fat body hotties, I'm sure you can relate to this that when you go shopping for clothing, that's kind of outside the norm. So, outside of size, what is that, 14, 16?
Mm.
Especially when I was younger, no options. I had to wear some of my mother's clothing. I had to wear my older sister's clothing. Not only that, I'm thinking about when I was in college and I couldn't fit in the desk chairs.
Mhm.
When I traveled a couple times and I couldn't fit in the seat in the airplane and I had to get extender belts and I felt so terrible for even having to ask for that. Going to the movie theaters, am I going to fit in the seats? If I go to an event, if the chairs are going to be able to hold me, it's something I'm thinking about all the time. This world was not made for bodies that are bigger or that look anything other than a smaller size and able bodied. So I just never had a space where it was full of fat people. And so, when I moved here, I knew that the space was needed because I wasn't seeing it. So that's when I was like, no, 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 we need to be intentional about what this group is doing. So every time we have a swap, there's more and more people coming who are like coming from out of the state or from different cities. And they're like, I've needed this so badly. And so the need is there. And as long as that need is there, we will be there.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing all of your experiences with me. I can see how Fat Body Hotties is creating a space. I'm Lake Effect's ex Grant Nunez speaking with Sarah Wynotsky and Ashley Murtis about the local group they organized called Fat Body Hotties. I'd love to learn more about what happens at Fat Body Hottie swaps. Like, what should people know if they want to attend and participate?
To start off, this is a completely free clothing swap. You do not have to have donations or bring clothing in to participate. You don't have to bring anything. Of course, it's great when people do. So we have a bunch of tables set up, organized by sizes. So like 1 and 2X, 3 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Really what we do is we have a bunch of reusable bags. People from the swaps bring. Ashley usually has a lot because she is also involved with Food Not Bombs. I keep a lot of my bags to reuse as well, and people are able to, pick up a bag or 2 or 3. There's no limit as to what people can grab, and they browse the items. And there are also usually bathrooms that people can go to try things on. Now that we're at Sherman Phoenix, kind of in the down times of when if people aren't looking at clothes or they already have, but they still want to be in the space, there's all of those Black owned businesses that we are wanting to highlight as well. And so once the swap wraps up a little bit, like in, I think usually an hour before it ends, we actually start kind of packing up items for local organizations to take back and donate to the communities that they serve. We are really wanting to make sure that we're not only like providing this for our community for people who are able to attend, but there's a bunch of people that are not able to attend, and we want to make sure that they're able to be a part of this as well.
It's okay, I can add. So follow us on social media, Fat Body Hotties, for the events. We're at Sherman Phoenix. And I really love that at Sherman Phoenix, we're in their community space, that it's like right away when you enter the entrance, and then we're basically like right to the right. So easy for anyone who's a wheelchair user to be able to get right to the clothing swap. And if you have any clothes that you no longer want anymore, that then someone else may treasure them. But again, it's not a requirement at all to bring any clothes, just bring your awesome self. And then leftover clothes go to various awesome orgs: Pathfinders, Milwaukee LGBT Center, Harambe's Kitchen. We have Aurora Psych, Behavioral Health, and Freighter's ER that are going to attend and pick up clothes with the coming up swap. And one of the orgs that Sarah and I are so proud of that we donated a lot of clothes to, we had people from a correction center. I want to emphasize that we're completely against the prison system, but we want to do everything we can to help those who have been affected by the prison system and who are transitioning out. So at this correction center, they were emphasizing helping people who are transitioning out back into regular life, and how a lot of these people do not have any clothes whatsoever and would have been just really basic stuff going out. And they potentially are getting really nice stuff with the clothing swap leftovers. So we absolutely love all of our orgs, but I know Sarah and I were really, really proud to have this org help out so many people.
Absolutely. That's amazing that at the end of the day, the clothes that don't get swapped go to good places and spaces. Well, Sarah and Ashley, thank you both so much for speaking with me today. I really enjoyed learning more about you both, and also the joy of Fat Body Hotties.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Sarah Wynatsky and Ashley Murtis are organizers for Fat Body Hotties. They spoke with Lake Effect's Excret Nunez. You can visit the next Fat Body Hotties clothing swap this Saturday, October 11th. The event will take place from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Sherman Phoenix. Humboldt Park in Milwaukee's Bayview neighborhood is home to Chill on the Hill, fishing in the lagoon, a beer garden, and much, much more. To learn more about its history, Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski went to the park to meet up with Bayview historian and author Ron Winkler. He begins with sharing Humboldt Park's creation story.
It was just land that belonged to two families. It was the Mann family, and their mansion still stands on Logan Avenue, just north of Idaho Street. So they owned that land, and then the other land that became part of Humboldt Park was owned by the Wilcox family, and that was the western part. So that was the initial acreage that was purchased for the original Humboldt Park, which of course at that time was called South Park. So there were 5 parks that were created in 1890.
Right, and this was before we even had a Milwaukee County park system, right? These first 5 parks?
That's right. They were in fact created by the city of Milwaukee because there were no free public gathering places. There were a few small squares and triangles and things that were green spaces, but not very big. And there were beer gardens, but the beer gardens charged. So the city wanted to provide something for all of the citizens. So they created 5 parks. South Park, which became Humboldt Park, Lincoln Park, which became Kosciuszko Park, North Park, which became Sherman Park, West Park, which became Washington Park, and Lake Park, which is the only one that has retained its original name. So
who was the Humboldt that Humboldt Park is named after? Because it was renamed, a couple years after it was first established?
In 1900, yes.
Okay.
And it was named for Baron von Humboldt, who was a lifelong resident of Berlin, which was at that time part of Prussia. And he was quite a Renaissance man. He was kind of like our Wisconsin Increase Lapham, but on a much larger scale. And he traveled a lot of places and did a lot of research and exploration. He even was able to determine through his studies that human-induced climate change was taking place. So he is considered the father of climatology and environmentalism.
So we're sitting in front of the lagoon, which is kind of the park's main focal point, central location. It's looked different over the decades, even centuries, since this park was first established, but it was built into this park, correct?
That's correct. The park was opened up in 1891, and one of the first projects they did was to create a lake, or a lagoon as we refer to these in Milwaukee. So what they did was to create a small lagoon, and they put a boathouse on the south side of it, and that was in 1893. And then in 1910, they moved that boathouse over to the present location of the pavilion, and in preparation for that, they created an island. So that was quite a big undertaking. And then they built the boathouse, which was made of concrete, and they connected it to the island, and people could cross and have picnics and view the lagoon from that island. So that boathouse had, as the name implies, rowboats that were for rent, but so did the original pavilion. They also had a warming room for ice skates and ice skating in the winter, and they also had concessions there, and it was open for meetings and gatherings and different occasions. So that was in 1910, and then in 1928 they expanded the lagoon again, because in 1920 land north of Idaho Street was purchased, and then the park became its present size of roughly 73 acres.
Right, so some of these buildings, like the two-story boathouse, there's some photos of what this lagoon looked like at its peak, and it's so impressive. But yeah, some of these buildings aren't here yet today, but the pavilion behind us, you see some of the land and stone, some of the original historic structures. And I had always assumed maybe this was always here, but turns out it was built for the park as a maintenance structure and some other things. But for the buildings surrounding the pavilion, we also have tennis courts here. Does the general layout, is it similar to what it looked like at its peak?
Yes, pretty much so. The only difference is that there have been additions of playgrounds. The tennis courts were originally clay, and there's also a wading pool that is adjacent to the current service building. But you mentioned about this pavilion, which originally was the service building. That was built to replace the original boathouse, which was moved over here, and that was, of course, in 1910. And then, during the Depression, there were 3 WPA projects that occurred here. the building of the service building, the construction of the band shell, and an actual enhancement of the creek that used to flow from the lagoon. It took the overflow from the lagoon and then ended at the corner of Quincy and Oklahoma Avenue.
Now, you mentioned the band shell as part of those WPA projects. Now, the one that's standing here currently is, they call it this more Swedish chalet style band shell, but the original one had that classic 1900 Art Deco inspiration. Kind of looked like the Washington Park band shell, right?
Yes, that's correct. And in fact, it was modeled on the Hollywood Bowl and also in Chicago, but on a much smaller scale. But the Washington Park band shell, which still exists, was they were constructed at the same time as WPA projects. That was one of the top things in the park. There were all kinds of concerts and opera and very famous people who came here and also to Washington Park. Unfortunately, in 1976, due to arson, the band shell was destroyed, and the next year it was rebuilt as the chateau, and that chateau was built upon the base of the old band shell, so that opened in 1977.
Ron Winkler is a Bayview historian and author. He spoke with Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski in June. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, a new episode of Bubbler Talk takes us to a little-known trail that explores Milwaukee's water history. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.